Quit eating your burgers off a coffee table. If you want to eat a burger, put it on a bar. Follow your instincts to B-dubs for the new All-American Cheeseburger. Fresh, juicy beef smashed till it's crispy around the edges, covered in gooey cheese, and stacked to the ceiling with deliciousness. And knock that baby down with a frosted beer at the bar, just like the sports gods intended. The new All-American Cheeseburger at Buffalo Wild Wings. Roar! Please drink responsibly.
Football represents something we are.
Football is like life. You gotta push.
Fantasy football is about proving that you are better than your friends.
Hold up.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Faceoff.
I'm gonna do what's best for the team.
Where fantasy meets reality.
Pure fantasy football nirvana.
And now your hosts.
Let the games begin.
Anthony Cervino and Michael Hoff.
And welcome back to the FF Faceoff, where fantasy meets reality. It is always a pleasure to have you with us for an absolutely fired-up, bounce-back quarterback edition of the most dynamic fantasy football podcast on the planet, which is now part of the brand new full-time fantasy podcast network. And as always, we have a lot to talk about right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the best in the world!
Coming to you live from the FF Faceoff studio at the gorgeous Jersey Shore, I am your host, Anthony Cervino. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. And while you're at it, don't forget to follow the show at the FF Faceoff as well. You can find us on all of the top social media platforms. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, Facebook Live, Periscope, Twitter, or Twitch, welcome to the big show. And if you're joining us right now in podcast format on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Podcast, Amazon Alexa, TuneIn, or Apple Podcast, thanks for stopping by. But before we get into the action, here is a public service announcement from His Lordship.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
All right, guys, you know the drill. If you like today's episode and subscribe to our channel, please leave us a comment saying that you have subscribed. And once you're done, we will reply back to as many as we can to show our appreciation to you. I always like to remind you that we are a cost-free production here at the FF Faceoff, but just because we are a cost-free production, that doesn't mean that a lot of time doesn't go into our efforts in terms of preparation, pre-production, post-production, and research. And because we do bring you a cost-free program, all we ask for in return is for some cost-free engagements, things that you can do to help us grow our fan base and our community. These interactions and engagements are things that you can do right now as you're watching the show or listening to the show on your podcast platform. Anytime somebody likes an episode, anytime somebody subscribes to the channel and hits the alert icon so you can be notified that we are live or when we upload, anytime you share our content or leave us an oh-so-important 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, it not only helps us reach more of you, but all of your engagements and interactions never ever go unnoticed. And before I forget, if you ever want to skip the public service announcement and jump to a certain segment or talking point, all you have to do is check out the description and click on the timestamp, which I usually install within an hour after publishing. Now, if you're listening or watching on a mobile app, a YouTube mobile app, the timestamp links do not work. But that is a YouTube issue and not a me issue, so please take it up with them. However, it doesn't mean that these timestamps are useless, because all you have to do is open up your video or your podcast player and drag the bar to the time that you want to go to, the time that reflects what you see in the description, and you're there. Everybody wins, and of course the timestamps do work on a YouTube desktop platform, so everybody wins.
And that's an order.
And now that that's all out of the way, let's get right into the action with some bounce-back quarterbacks. So I do have some news before we begin, and the news is on Tuesday. My old partner, Mike Hoff, you could follow him at the FF Realist. He will be making his return from his hiatus. Mike's been away tending to some personal issues. You know, he recently got married, so I guess he's getting acclimated with that kind of stuff. He has a family too, and some people just get burnt out and need some time to clear their heads. So Mike will be joining me once again. He is one of the founders of the FF Faceoff, so I'll be happy to have him back and get the old band back together. So now let's start with the bounce back quarterbacks. And the first one, and you might look at the screen or look at me sideways when I say his name, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And you're going to say, well, Aaron Rodgers, bounce back? What the hell are you talking about? Well, last year, Aaron Rodgers finished as the QB6. And no, that's not terrible, but we are accustomed to seeing Aaron Rodgers finish somewhere in the top 3 and really in the top 2 for a lot of his career. Last year, he finished as a QB6 in fantasy, threw for 4,400 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And Aaron Rodgers, he normally throws 25 touchdowns. Aside from his injury years, he can throw 30 touchdowns in his sleep. Albeit he only threw 2 picks, but he is one of those players that he doesn't throw for double-digit interceptions a lot, so 2 picks is right around the norm for him. Actually, the last time he threw for double-digit interceptions, he threw 11 picks in 2010. He is one of the more efficient quarterbacks out there. The Packers threw the ball 43.3 times per game last year. Good for second in the NFL. Rodgers was 5th in attempts, 10th in red zone attempts, 2nd in deep ball attempts. But here are the issues, and here's why Aaron Rodgers had a little bit of a regression last year. His supporting cast efficiency, he was 21st amongst quarterbacks in supporting cast. And he was also 26th in protection rate. I believe going into 2019, the supporting cast efficiency rate is going to get a lot better. Last year, the Packers had a lot of new faces. I get that Devontae Adams and Geronimo Allison have been mainstays in this offense, but Jordy Nelson was gone. They brought in Jimmy Graham. They drafted Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They drafted Equanimeous St. Brown. A few new pass catchers, and we know from what we saw in the reports with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy that Aaron Rodgers doesn't always like to target the young players. He doesn't like the new players. They're not new anymore. He is going to have, or he's had, a full offseason to work with the young guys. He is now going into his 2nd season with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham only caught, 2 touchdowns last year? This is a tight end who saw 91 targets. Usually an 8 to 10 touchdown tight end. I believe Jimmy Graham's upside, Jimmy Graham, who you can get in the 14th round, and if you check out my undervalued, overvalued tight ends episode in the archive, you'll see why I'm buying into Jimmy Graham this year when I smashed him last year. His ADP last year was right around the 5th, 6th round. This year, it's 14th round. Jimmy Graham is going to bounce back and get back into that 8 to 10 touchdown range, and that's only going to reflect Aaron Rodgers' total production. He is going to get back Geronimo Allison, who we've seen that rapport get going before Allison's injury last year. Not to mention Devontae Adams, who is a top 2 or 3 wide receiver in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers is going to bounce back in 2019, and he is going to probably finish somewhere in the top 3. The next quarterback that I do want to talk about is, let me pull up my notes, Cam Newton. Cam Newton right now sitting with an ADP in the 9th round, 9th pick in the 9th round. The 12th quarterback off the board. Last year, we know that Cam Newton dealt with shoulder issues, a shoulder injury, which kind of derailed his season. In the first half of the year leading up to his shoulder injury, which he did have surgery on, and he is recovering on track for 2019. Cam Newton was performing as a top 8 quarterback. He finished as a quarterback 13. And I believe Cam Newton's weapons are going to be better in 2019 than they were last year. Devin Funchess was operating as the wide receiver 1, and that's just not him. Devin Funchess, who is now the wide receiver 2 or 3 in Indianapolis, we're going to see Funchess have a big year. And the reason why we really didn't see that from Funchess in Carolina is because he is not the wide receiver 1. The wide receiver 1 is going to be DJ Moore, who is entering his 2nd year. We are going to see Curtis Samuel, who battled injuries leading up to 2018. We are going to see Curtis Samuel really begin to emerge as the wide receiver 2. He's versatile. He can line up all over the field. He can take carries. He's an explosive weapon in the open field. I think the combination of DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel is going to be fruitful for Cam Newton's fantasy owners. We are also going to see Greg Olsen, and this is where I kind of want to pump the brakes a little bit. Greg Olsen should probably be in the booth somewhere, but he is going to attempt to finish out his career strong. However, should Olsen go down again with his recurring foot injury, I'm a big believer in Ian Thomas. And Ian Thomas, we saw a tale of 2 different players. Last year when Olsen went down early, Ian Thomas was forced to play early and often, and he just wasn't ready early in his rookie year. Olsen ended up coming back, which sent Ian Thomas back to the tight end 2 role, and it wasn't long before Olsen went down again. However, towards the end of the year, when Ian Thomas had all these weeks to learn from his early season mistakes, and he had a few weeks to learn behind Greg Olsen, we saw what Ian Thomas can really do in the final quarter of the year, and I think Ian Thomas is going to be one of the surprise fantasy tight ends when Greg Olsen retires or gets injured again. Aside from those pass catchers, there's Christian McCaffrey, who's one of the more dynamic running backs in the NFL. I believe Christian McCaffrey is Cam Newton's probably his best pass-catching weapon, despite the fact that I like DJ Moore, and despite the fact that I like Curtis Samuel a lot. If you can get Christian McCaffrey the football on the screen or in the open field, he can break a touchdown play, an 80-yard touchdown play in his sleep. The Carolina Panthers are full of playmakers on their offense. And I believe that Cam Newton is going to bounce back and finish somewhere in the top 8 to 10 quarterbacks in 2019. The next quarterback I want to talk about that is poised to bounce back is my guy, Kirk Cousins. And if you, listen to the show last year, I was touting Kirk Cousins as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, something that he's done earlier in his career. I figured, hey, you have Diggs and Thielen and Rudolph, and it just didn't work out for Kirk Cousins in year one with the Minnesota Vikings. However, in year two, things could be a lot different. Kirk Cousins right now is going as the 20th quarterback off the board, 12th pick in the 12th round, and the fact that you can get Kirk Cousins, who was pretty much a perennial quarterback one for the years in Washington, that you can get him this late in the draft, it shows just how deep the quarterback position is in 2019. Kirk Cousins, he is getting help from an underrated source. Not only is he going to have his offensive coordinator for a full season because they fired DeFilippo in the middle of the year, but he is also going to get help from Gary Kubiak, who is joining the Vikings after a long time in Denver. Kubiak's an offensive genius. He is going to be helping the Vikings offense out a ton. Not only is he going to establish a run with Dalvin Cook, which is going to open things up for Kirk Cousins, but he is also going to get Kirk Cousins, outside the pocket, play action, and deep balls. Last year, Kirk Cousins was 14th in deep ball attempts, 16th in supporting cast efficiency, but like Aaron Rodgers, 33rd in protection rate. That protection rate must improve if Kirk Cousins and his fantasy value is going to bounce back like I think it is. The Vikings passed the ball sixth most in the NFL, 40.4 passing plays per game, fourth in attempts. Cousins attempted 606 passes last year, finished 10th overall in passing yards, 6th in air yards, 9th in pass attempt distance. Kirk Cousins also finished 9th in passing touchdowns with 30. If Kirk Cousins can get a better rapport with Thielen and Diggs, because as good as that tandem was, there is room to grow. And we also saw the Vikings not only extend Kyle Rudolph, but they drafted Irv Smith, who is one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the NFL. What really hurts Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, the fact that they do not have an established wide receiver 3. And this is something we've seen for the past couple of years, that outside of Thielen and Diggs and their tight end, they didn't really have a reliable third option in the passing game. And what I think we are going to see in 2019 is that your wide receiver 3 is really going to be a pseudo wide receiver 3 in the form of one of these tight ends, whether it is Rudolph or Smith. I think the tight end position is going to be a lot busier in the Vikings offense in 2019, which is only going to help Kirk Cousins, especially in the red zone and especially in the middle of the field. What is also going to help Kirk Cousins is a presumably healthy Dalvin Cook. Cook missed some time earlier in the year in 2018. He missed time in his rookie year in 2017. If Dalvin Cook can finally stay healthy for a full 16 games, his explosiveness and ability as a pass catcher is also going to bolster Kirk Cousins' production in fantasy. I think Kirk Cousins, who was going as the 20th quarterback off the board, has fringe quarterback 1 upside or better for 2019. And I am absolutely positively buying Kirk Cousins, especially in a 2-quarterback league, but even in a 1-quarterback league. You could really stock up and bolster your running back and your wide receiver positions, and then wait until later in a draft and get a player like Kirk Cousins and still win your league. Another quarterback I want to talk about is Jimmy Garoppolo. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I am going to include him as a bounce back, even though he missed most of last year with an injury. I think Garoppolo is kind of going under the radar right now. 17th quarterback off the board, 11th pick in the 11th round. Look at Jimmy Garoppolo's supporting cast. not only is he going to have Dante Pettis and Marquise Goodwin, and we all know Garoppolo's rapport with Goodwin was outstanding when they were on the field together, but they also drafted Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurd. You have a returning George Kittle who lit the fantasy football and NFL landscape on fire last year. They brought in Tevin Coleman, who is an exceptional pass-catching running back. They have Jerick McKinnon coming off his injury, who didn't even play a snap last year, not to mention Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert. Jimmy Garoppolo going as the 17th quarterback off the board. You want to talk about legit quarterback one upside? I mean, we saw C.J. Beathard put up some pretty good numbers. We saw Nick Mullins play pretty well considering he was the QB3 on the team. If Jimmy Garoppolo is the player that we believe that he is, and I do believe Jimmy Garoppolo is the real deal, he is a steal going as the 17th quarterback off the board. He has top 10 quarterback one upside written all over him. Another quarterback I want to talk about who has the possibility of bouncing back, and now we're getting into these late round gems. Derek Carr, 23rd quarterback off the board, 14th round ADP. Now, I'm not going to recommend taking Derek Carr as your number one quarterback. He is more of that insurance policy. Like if you're getting a Lamar Jackson, if you're getting a Dak Prescott, or if you're getting a Kirk Cousins or Jimmy Garoppolo, these are the other quarterbacks that you want to protect your fantasy investment and go grab a solid quarterback too with upside. And Derek Carr is the first one that comes to mind. Derek Carr was in the MVP race a few years ago, and Derek Carr, he is getting a brand new supporting cast. They moved on from Amari Cooper, who's in Dallas now. There's no more Jared Cook, who was the Raiders and Derek Carr's most productive pass catcher last year. So you take those players out of the mix. Jordy Nelson's retired, who was a mistake signing by the Raiders last year. It was a joke. They drafted Josh Jacobs, who has 3 down running back upside written all over him. Just, like the going narrative, if you can establish the running game, then things are going to open up for your quarterback because the opposing defense absolutely positively has to honor the run. And I think John Gruden is going to try to establish a quality running game. This way, Derek Carr isn't getting blitzed every play. Now, let's talk about that supporting cast. Antonio Brown, J.J. Nelson, Tyrell Williams. Their tight end position isn't going to be as strong without Jared Cook. But Darren Waller is getting talked up, and so is rookie Foster Moreau, who you can get for nothing in your rookie drafts and Dynasty. It wouldn't surprise me if Foster Moreau opened the year as the tight end one, who's a pretty decent pass-catching tight end coming out of college. If you factor in all of these new weapons for the Raiders, it might take Derek Carr a month to really get acclimated with his new supporting cast. But once October comes around, Derek Carr could be one of the better fantasy football quarterbacks for 2019. Like I said, it could take him a couple of weeks to really get going. But once this offense really begins to click, they could be one of the more surprising fantasy football offenses in the league this year. And you're not really going to need Derek Carr. If you're drafting Derek Carr as a backup, you're not going to need him until A, your quarterback one is struggling, gets injured, or a bye week. So even if Derek Carr gets off to a slow start, it doesn't matter because you're probably not going to need him until October or November, more towards that middle to end of 2019. If you're in a 2-quarterback league or a super flex league, I am more inclined to take Derek Carr and deal with the offensive growing pains because I truly believe Derek Carr is the real deal. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be that MVP player that we've seen. I believe that year was an anomaly, but I think he can be extremely productive for fantasy football purposes. You also have to take in consideration negative game script. The Raiders' defense was atrocious last year, and although they brought in some pieces, this defense is going to struggle once again in 2019. And if the Raiders are playing from behind like I think they will be, Derek Carr is going to have to pass a ton, which is another reason why I am drafting Derek Carr. And last but not least, the final quarterback I want to talk about who has the opportunity to bounce back this year is Andy Dalton, and I can't talk enough about Andy Dalton. When Andy Dalton and AJ Green are on the field together, they are one of the better quarterback wide receiver tandems in the past 8 years. Take AJ Green, take Tyler Boyd, who really began to emerge last year. Take the fact that Joe Mixon is really becoming a polished 3-down running back. And then take Tyler Eifert or that tight end position that has a lot of question marks. Forget about it. If Tyler Eifert can give you anything, he's at least a productive red zone threat. However, if Tyler Eifert goes down again, like we really have to anticipate, Drew Sample is a pretty good under-the-radar sleeper at tight end. He's not coming out of college extremely hyped as a pass catcher, but he also didn't get a ton of opportunities. I think there is untapped potential for Drew Sample as a pass catcher, and we could see that sooner rather than later when Tyler Eifert goes down. And we are also going to see John Ross in his year 3 possibly take a step forward. It is a new offense in Cincinnati, a new offense under Zach Taylor, and I can't stress this enough. I am not high on the Bengals. I'm not high on Andy Dalton and Zach Taylor because Taylor comes from the Rams and because Taylor is a Sean McVay protege. You have to think about how flat and how deflated things were in Cincinnati. The fan base was deflated. The locker room was deflated. The players were deflated. Everything was deflated because of Marvin Lewis. Things got extremely stale because if Marvin Lewis put together a winning team, they were pretty much more or less one and done in the playoffs. And if they were bad, they were really bad because of injuries. Take Marvin Lewis out of the equation, and you bring in Zach Taylor, a young and up-and-coming offensive mind, and all of a sudden, the fans, the team, the locker room, the players, they believe that this change is a positive. They believe in their new offensive-minded head coach who is really going to make this offense take a step forward. Andy Dalton right now, you can get as a 26th quarterback off the board, late 14th, early 15th round ADP. You can have this kid for free. And if you're protecting your investment, let's say you're a Carson Wentz owner, you absolutely positively want to protect yourself. And why not protect yourself with a player like Andy Dalton who you can get for free? Andy Dalton has been a pretty good fantasy quarterback, very inconsistent depending on the matchup, but if you give him the right matchup and his supporting cast is healthy, forget about it. Andy Dalton can absolutely positively put up big-time numbers. If you take a look at Jared Goff's early career and you take a look at Andy Dalton's career early, especially in their years 2 and 3, they kind of match up pretty well, and I think Andy Dalton is a lot better than people are giving him credit for. I know a lot of the talk coming out of the draft that Ryan Finley was going to challenge Dalton for his job. I don't even think Ryan Finley, considering the reports that I am seeing from Bengals beat writers, I don't even think that Ryan Finley is going to beat out Jeff Driscoll for the QB2 spot, never mind beating Andy Dalton out as a starter. I think that is absurd. It is not going to happen, especially in 2019. I think Dalton is going to get every opportunity to succeed and see how good this Bengals offense is going to be with everybody healthy and this team running on all cylinders. Andy Dalton is also getting a bump in the offensive line as they drafted with a top 12 pick. His name is escaping me right now, but they drafted an offensive lineman who is only going to benefit Andy Dalton by protecting him and the rest of this Bengals offense. That'll do it for today's show. I will be coming back to you on Tuesday with Mike Hoff. He will be finally making his return to the show. We will probably talk the latest NFL news. And then later in the week, we will be doing more bounce back positions, probably running back next on Thursday. We have a lot of great things cooking here at the FF Faceoff. We have a lot of great things cooking at the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network with over 24 hours of programming coming at you per week, and we are not even at training camp yet. I will also be working on a project with the great Dr. Roto and the Full-Time Fantasy Network. I will be producing some shows. I will also be joining Dr. Roto on some shows. I already appeared on his radio show on the Fantasy Network. 2019 is going to be a big year for the FF Faceoff, a big year for me personally, and I am super excited to get this going. If you're listening right now in podcast format on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa, and especially you Apple Podcast users, or any user of a podcast platform that allows you to leave us a 5-star rating and review, please subscribe to the FF Faceoff. Please leave us a 5-star rating and a 5-star review telling everyone why you love the show and why we are the best damn fantasy football podcast on the planet, where fantasy meets reality, because the more subscriptions, ratings, and reviews that we get, the more people we can reach, and in the end, we want to help each and every one of you win fantasy football championships, dominate your leagues, and absolutely positively crush the competition. We will maintain the culture of winning we've built here in the FF Faceoff for soon to be 3 years since our inception and over 200 episodes. Until Tuesday, my name is Anthony Cervino. Follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Jamie, Progressive #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hey, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. This is your daily pep talk. I know it's been rough going ever since people found out about your a cappella group, Mad Harmony, but you will bounce back. I mean, you're the guy always helping people find coverage options with the Name Your Price tool. It should be you giving me the pep talk. Now get out there, hit that high note, and take Mad Harmony all the way to nationals this year! Sorry, it's pitchy.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Get to Old Navy, Saturday and Sunday only. All Old Navy actives on sale for 50% off. Get all your family's favorite mesh tees, go-dry shorts, and active styles for 50% off Saturday and Sunday only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 6/22 to 6/23. Excludes in-store clearance.